Township of Howell Planning Board meeting Thursday, February 17th, 2022. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on January 7th, 2022, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on January 7th, 2022, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on January 7th, 2022, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. Members of the public will have a chance to ask questions and comment on applications once the chairman opens the hearing up for members of the public. If you wish to ask questions or comment on an application, you will need to use the raise your hand feature and we will bring you into the meeting one at a time. You will need to have audio and video capability. You will be sworn in and you will be required to provide your name and address. For anyone calling in, you can press *9 to raise your hand or lower your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. This meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bavai is absent. Mr. Cristiano?
Here.
Mr. Dorado?
Here.
Mr. Husser?
Here.
Mr. Greenfield?
Here.
Mr. Nicastro?
Present.
Councilwoman O'Donnell?
Here.
Mr. Seaman?
Here.
Mr. Spanville?
Here.
Ms. Talenti?
Here.
And Chairman Tannenhouse.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Could everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment for silence for all of our first responders and those serving both here and abroad. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have minutes up.
We do have minutes.
Okay, approval of minutes, special meeting, January 31st, 2022. Eligible voters, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Husser, Mr. DeCastro, Councilwoman O'Donnell, and Mr. Seaman.
I'll make motion.
Yeah. Was that Rob?
Yeah,
Leave-
motion a second.
Yeah, you're gonna wanna, you're gonna wanna try to call in on the number somehow. I think the audio and video is giving you the fritz again.
I'll make motion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro,
Yes.
Councilwoman O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay. Next regular meeting is February 3rd, 2022. Eligible voters are Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Husser, Councilwoman O'Donnell, Mr. Seaman, Mr. Spanville, and I think that's it, right? Mr. Talenti is, sorry,
No, she's here.
Ms.
Ms. Talenti.
Ms. Talenti.
I'll make a motion to approve February 3rd special meeting minutes.
I will
That was a
second.
regular. Who was the second? I'm sorry.
Cristiano.
Thank you. And that was a regular meeting, not a special.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
My
That's okay.
apologies.
That's okay. Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Councilwoman O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
and Ms. Talenti.
yes,
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay. Before we get to vouchers, I was remiss. Ms. Talente and Mr. Spanville, welcome to the team.
thank you.
Vouchers,
I have no vouchers.
correspondence.
I do have correspondence. First things first, if the board would like to, please think about going back live in-person meetings in April. If you want to discuss it or you want to talk about it, it's actually a very good time because it gives me a chance to get a notice in the paper. And as of right now, we have nothing scheduled for April. So we wouldn't have applicants that have to renotice or cancel meetings because we're doing something different than we've already noticed for.
So what I would recommend on that, Mr. Chair, since we do have some time to think it over between now and the next meeting, and we can, at the next meeting, you can make a decision one way or the other.
Fair enough, thank you.
Okay, the other thing I sent our new members, Mr. Spanville, Ms. Talenti, and Mr. Greenfield, the training schedule for the mandatory courses for new board members. It was sent as an email. If you could please look at it, figure out which class you'd like to take. Right now, they're remote, so you take them from home. And let me know so I can register you. Once you're registered, we really don't get a refund, so try to make sure that you mark your calendar and that it's a good day for you, okay? The last item I have is not really correspondence, but the last item on the agenda tonight, case number SP 1075 for 127 Squonkam Yellowbrook LLC. Their notice was deficient, so they will not be heard tonight. They need to be rescheduled with a new notice.
Okay,
And that's all I have.
thank you. All right, course, resolutions.
I have no resolutions.
Submission waivers, case number SP-1098, 90 Industrial Court LLC.
That is Mr. Pape's case.
Good evening,
Evening.
Mr. Chair, board members, board professionals. Kenneth Pape on behalf of your applicant, 90 Industrial Court LLC. There are a number of waivers that were identified in correspondence generated by CME Associates dated January 13th, 2022. I've reviewed those and wish to withdraw letters D and E. Those were administrative and we will comply. And I would ask if Ms. Newman could address the board as to her determination on the balance.
Thank you. Do we want to swear in Ms. Newman?
You swear or affirm the testimony about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we have a January 13th, 2022 review letter. As was indicated by Mr. Pape, items D and E will be provided on a subsequent submission. And with that, I take no exception to the balance of these items being waived for the purposes of the application being deemed complete.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pape, anything else?
Nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Does anybody on the board have any questions? Not, I'll entertain a motion, please.
I'll make motion.
Thank you. Second,
I'll second.
okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Councilwoman O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
Thank you. And Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next next submission waiver is case number SP-1099, Monmouth Solar 1 LLC.
That is Attorney Grace Chun. She's coming into the meeting.
Good evening, Chair members. Grace Chun on behalf of the applicant, Monmouth Solar 1 LLC.
You?
As initial matter, I just wanted to address the board with respect to one of the waiver requests that we had submitted. Item number 85, we are withdrawing that waiver request and we will be submitting a woodlands management plan.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, or would you like our professional to summarize?
I will allow Ms. Newman to summarize.
Thank you. Ms. Newman?
Ron, do I need to be sworn on this or I'm good?
We'll swear you in again. Do you swear or affirm testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do. So, Mr. Chairman, my only issue was in fact the woodlands management plan because tree clearing is proposed. So understanding that that item will be provided as it relates to the balance of the items, given the nature of this application as solar, I take no exception of the granting of those waivers for the purposes of deeming this application complete.
Great, thank you. Ms. John, does that conclude your testimony?
That does.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody from the board have any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. One second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
Yes.
Councilwoman O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. Spanville,
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Night.
All right, applications before the board. Case number SD-2990, FP Howell. Eileen, can you please list off who are the eligible voters? And just hold on, I want to get a piece of paper. Go ahead.
The eligible voters are Mr. Bavai, who is not here tonight, Mr. Cristiano, Mr. Dorado, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Husser, Mr. Nacastro, Councilwoman O'Donnell, and Mr. Seaman, and Ms. Talenti and yourself, Chairman Tannenhouse, have certified to vote. So you have almost everybody, or I guess everybody here tonight is eligible.
So it's Cristiano,
Except for Mr.
Dorado.
Spanville.
Oh, Mr. Spanville is also as well?
He's not. He's the only one who's not of everybody
Okay.
that's here tonight.
So Nacastro. Got it. Okay,
So just Eileen, what's the total number of eligible voters?
9,
So we have a full board.
yes.
who's the
Okay.
ninth one? I got Cristiano.
Mr.
Cristiano.
Dorado, Greenfield, Husser, Nacastro, O'Donnell,
O'Donnell.
Seaman, Talenti, and Tannenhouse.
Great, thank you. Counselor?
Good evening again, Mr. Chair and board members, board professionals and public. Kenneth Pape of the firm Heilbron Pape on behalf of your applicant FP Howell. This is an application for preliminary and final subdivision and site plan approval it is a fourth public hearing. We appeared first on August 31st and October 8th of last year, most recently on January 31st. of this year, and this is our fourth. This is an affordable housing project. As the record reflects and as the board members are aware, this application went through a court settlement. We are one of the identified developments in the Howell Township Affordable Housing Court Settlement. We also entered into an agreement, a contract with the township, a developer's agreement that set forth requirements and obligations. And we also participated in establishing an enabling ordinance that created standards for the project. And as we have indicated to the board and to the public, it has been our goal that to abide by the terms of the court settlement, to abide by the terms of the settlement agreements with the township, and to abide by the terms of the ordinance. We completed our presentation to the board on all points last time we were together on January 31st. Your board members and your board professionals indicated a concern with the landscape plan. The applicant agreed to revisit the landscape plan, and in fact, Stuart Challoner, our design engineer, and his landscape team did revise the plans and did submit them to this board. And after those plans were submitted, 3 new reports were generated by the township. They are the Shade Tree Commission on February 7th indicated no comments. CME, over the signature of Shari Spiro, on February 3rd commented on the adequacy of the plantings and indicated it was an acceptable plan, commented on the woodland management elements and indicated that it would be in compliance with your woodland management ordinance. And the Jennifer Beam did on February 2nd issued a letter and indicated that we have satisfied the township's requirement for buffering and that her office has no further landscaping comments. We believe we have now satisfied the last of the comments and concerns that were raised by the staff. Mr. Stuart Challoner is here this evening if anyone wishes to hear from him further. I did not intend to call him. I intended to advise the board that the plans were so generated and that those reports indicating they're acceptable have been issued. And that, Mr. Chair, concludes the applicant's direct presentation, unless there are any questions of the board members of any of the professionals who are participating.
Thank you, Mr. Pape. Does anybody on the board have any comments they'd like to add? If not, Mr. Pape?
Yes, I think we've reached the time, Mr. Chair, where it's to be open to the public and or to your professionals for any further examination. And I would only ask that before we conclude that I be given a brief opportunity to sum before a vote. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you. Okay, Eileen, can you please open it to the public? Please give the usual explanation on how to raise your hand so that they know that you know that they would like to speak, and also how to, if they're on their phone, how to unmute themselves and so forth.
At this time, the chairman has opened the hearing up for members of the public. We will bring you into the meeting one at a time, so please be patient. Anyone who wishes to ask questions or comments on the application needs to use the raise your hand feature. If you're calling in, you need to use *9 to raise or lower your hand, *6 to mute or unmute yourself. You will be required to have audio and video. You will be sworn in and need to give your name and address. And I do have someone, a member of the audience.
Can you see and hear me?
Yes,
Yes, we
I
can.
just need to swear you in first, sir. If you could just raise your right hand for me. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, please state and spell your name and give us your address.
My name is Fred Gazier, and I live at 24 Grist Mill Road, Howell, New Jersey.
And just spell your last name for us, Mr. Grazer.
Gasior.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me. This is the first time I've
Good
actually
evening.
spoke on camera. I'm going to read a lot, so I won't be looking up at you. I wish we were in person because I like to look at people when I'm talking to them. And I wish I could have had a chance to speak at the last meeting because a lot of the things I'm going to talk about were discussed there. My issue with this project is its size, its location, and what kind of planning is going to be needed after this project is up and running. From here out, what I'm going to talk about are mostly my observations. The planning board could take my observation and use them however they choose. My wife and I have lived in Howell for 24 years on Grist Mill Road. We are very familiar with this property. We used to buy fruit and vegetables off of them a long time ago. Our property borders near the borderline where this property will be. And we do often take walks onto that property through the woods. The first thing I would like to talk about is the environmental report. I've read all the reports that I could find related to this project, including understanding that we have a need for affordable housing and there is a court requirement for it. Some of the observations that I have made are somewhat in conflict with this environmental report. I read the report. It's a nice cookie cutter report. I assume that this report is paid for by the applicant. Is that correct?
Mr. Pape?
If you're referring to the environmental report that was filed by the applicant as part of the materials, the answer
Yes.
is yes. I don't know
Yes.
what you're reading from.
Okay. So I don't know how much time they actually spent on that property, but from reading the report, I don't think it was too much because they referred to their research, local documents, history, and the library. But on this screen, which is page 11 of this report, these are all the animals that they observe or they say could be indigenous to this area or around this area. I would just like to add to that based on my observations of what I have seen when we go on that property. You have turkeys, you have red foxes, you have gray foxes, you have coyotes, you have red-tailed hawks. We have an occasional bald eagle because we have a big pond behind our house. We have several species of heron. We have kingfishers, egrets, owls, bats, 2 species of woodpeckers, hummingbird, cardinals, and I will say we have not seen any bobcats or bears because there was a mention of that on that report. I just want to add that to that. All right. These are my observations as far as the traffic in that area. For 20 years after I retired from the state police, I taught at Marlboro High School, actually 17 years. I made that commute every morning, AM and PM, until the last couple years. Here is what I've observed. The traffic has become exponentially worse as the years have gone on. Traffic routinely backs up from past Home Depot southbound to Aldrich Road in the afternoon. Motorists, including myself, take West Farms Road to Fort Plains Road to get around all of the traffic. Weekday afternoons, Fort Plains Road is an annex of Route 9. It is a very busy road. The intersections at Casino N9, West Farms N9, Sunnyside N9, Holtes N9 routinely back up past the jug handle, which prevents cars taking the jug handle from getting over to make a left-hand turn. So in essence, what they do is block the roadway. West Farms and Fort Plains Road, that intersection is a hazard. I'm sure you already all know about that. And from watching the council meeting the other night, I think there's a plan to do something with that. Fort Plains and Holtz's routinely backs up in 4 directions. Now, the traffic report. I assume again that this report was paid for by the applicant. Does the planning board do their own separate traffic report?
Mr.
The
Chair?
planning board reviews all of the reports and plans that have been submitted, and its professionals generate their own response reports. So there's a report from the board's engineer, there's a report from the board's planner that address all facets of the application.
Okay, those reports and the responses to those reports, are they made part of the record?
Yes, they have exhibit numbers. They're part of the exhibit list. They're part of the record, and Mr. Pape has referenced them many times.
Okay, thank you. All right, as far as this report submitted, we all understand that this is hypothetical, what this is, because the place hasn't been built yet. And as stated in this document, they use software to predict what they think is going to happen. So here are a few things, my observations, that aren't in here. Fort Plains Road has 2 blind curves and 1 blind hill that are in the area of the ingress and egress. How do I know that? Well, because I use that road and I take Sunnyside to Fort Plains in both directions. And I can't enumerate to you the amount of times in the last 24 years I pulled out and there was no one coming because they were either around the blind curve or the blind hill and they were on my bumper. Fort Plains is a very poorly lit road. I believe there's only 3, maybe 4 traffic lights on that road. There are no sidewalks. There's nowhere for anyone to walk if they want to try to walk to public transportation. Now, you are all reasonable people. I want you to think reasonably about what I'm going to say to you right now. 319 units are how many parking spaces? How many? Can anybody answer that for me?
Mr. Pape, do you recall that, or Mr. Challoner?
You want to know the number of parking
Yeah,
stalls?
number, I couldn't find it. I looked prior to this meeting tonight through all the documents.
I'm pretty certain you've given testimony on that.
Yeah, that's it. I know that we worked to make sure that we far exceeded the statutory and/or recess requirements.
But Mr. Chairman, if I could, and maybe Mr. Challoner can confirm, but the parking to be provided is 252. That's combined garage and driveway spaces. That's for the 72 single-family units at 2.5 spaces per unit. There's 542 spaces, including 122 guest spaces for the 155 townhome units. That's at 2.3 spaces per unit, and 190 spaces for the 92 condo or affordable units, and that's at 2 spaces per unit.
Yeah, I believe the grand total is just over 1,200 spaces.
Okay, so let's keep that reasonable thinking hat on. How many cars do you have in your family? My wife and I, we have 3. So you're going to have a lot of cars in and out of here. When I look at the traffic report submitted, the bottom of the report, it talks about a total of 148 cars coming out of there in the morning and 182 cars coming in there in the evening. Remember, think reasonably. Do you really think that those numbers are accurate, considering how many people can potentially live there at that location? Okay, I don't really have much more, but here's my issue with this project. The traffic. volume and safety. When you increase the volume of traffic on that road, which is already busy, you've also reduced the safety factor. I also want to know, and I really haven't seen, who's going to be on the hook for the improvements that are going to be made to all these intersections and this road as far as lighting when this place is up and running and somebody says, oh, gee, we never realized we were going to have that many cars on the road. Somebody's going to have to pay for it, and I haven't seen that yet. Hasn't been brought up. Lastly, have you ever considered what's going to happen when the Larson Road project is done? I know it's not Howell, but you know where those cars are going to go. They're going to come right to Holtz's Corner. You have to consider them. The last thing I have to say is an issue on Sunnyside Road that needs to be looked at. I brought it up to the council. I emailed the council manager. When my wife and I first moved there, there was a sign on the entrance to Sunnyside from Route 9 that limited the size of trucks on that road. If you've been on Sunnyside Road, you understand why that is. The road is a zigzag road. I've seen trucks get stuck on there and have to get back out. That sign is gone. I don't know why. It could have been knocked down, never replaced. The township manager explained about what process has to be done to put that back on there. I know what the statute is. I know what trucks would be allowed down there as far as construction goes or delivery goes, but that side needs to be put back up and the traffic on that road needs to be limited. So, and that's it. I thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm drinking wine while I'm talking to you. So I'm done. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. Gaisler.
Thank you.
If I might, Mr. Chair, I don't have any questions, but I would like to respond.
Yes,
Okay.
sure.
So with regard to the environmental report and the work that our clients put into the environmental issues, I can tell you that the applicant's professionals no less than 3 times met with the Environmental Commission and reviewed their concerns and was responsive to their concerns, and that's why we would return to them. We also made application to the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for wetland delineations and wetland approvals. All of those applications were processed and the permits were issued. So the environmental issues relating to the property, including the wildlife characteristics, were all reviewed, not only locally, but at the state. With regard to traffic, this board knows that existing traffic conditions are not a burden or responsibility on an applicant that brings an of-right development plan. This is an of-right development plan. And the numbers that were shared with the board by Mr. Gassier, those numbers were not total trips coming out of this project. I think that he may not have realized he was reading from the peak hour trips. So that report was reviewed by your staff and we stand by it.
Mr. Pape,
Yes,
could I make a recommendation, please?
surely.
Could you please explain what an as-of-right application is in layman's terms?
Sure. An as-of-right development is a plan that requires no variance relief, and it is a plan that is consistent with your zoning ordinances. So if I were asking to build a gas station in a residential zone, I'd have to deal with off-track traffic movements. But if I'm bringing a residential project in a residential zone and I am consistent with the requirements of the zone, then existing road conditions are not the responsibility of the applicant. In this instance, your applicant did, in the developer's agreement, agree to make $800,000 available for acquisition of land for road improvements and road improvements, which is above and beyond what the statute says an of right developer is required to do. But we acknowledge it's part of our contract with the town.
Thank you, Mr. Pape.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Gaisler. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Eileen?
Next, I have Ryan Ballou.
Can everybody hear me?
We
Hear
can.
you.
Will you be providing any testimony? I think our attorney is probably going to tell you that you need to have video in order to provide testimony. Thank you.
Sir, I just need to swear you in first. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name and give us your address.
Ryan Ballou, R-Y-A-N, last name Ballou, B as in boy, A-L-L-O-U. Live at 681 Fort Plains Road.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Ballou.
Just to carry on with the traffic study that was conducted on January 15th, 2021, on page 6 of the study, does not include a large development located down the street on Larson Road and North Prospect Road, known as Highview Homes, which has 216 affordable housing apartment units. Highview Homes application was in front of the Planning Board of Jackson in October 2017. In conclusion, the study is inaccurate because it does not have it within the study. And this question was risen last meeting, and the development was not brought up. It was actually denied by the applicant. I believe the study was intentionally left out for the study, personally.
Hey, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions of Mr. Ballou. The report was done accurately and honestly, and the communities that were included were the communities that were identified by the township to the applicant, and then the applicant's professionals further examined the area. They also included a growth factor on top of the raw numbers that are in the report. We're very comfortable that it's accurate.
Okay. I mean,
Mr. Pape or maybe Mr. Challoner, could you just, for purposes of the board understanding more precisely, where is that project in relation to this project?
was that a question to me?
No.
No, that was a question to the applicant and their team.
I got it on Google Earth. It's 5,800 feet.
Well, let's just give the applicant's team an opportunity to give us their perspective.
What was the question, Counselor?
Where is the project that was just referenced located versus where this project is located? What's the distance?
Mr. Challoner, is that something that you can calculate sitting there?
I'm trying to. At Highview Homes in Jackson?
Mr. Ballou, is that correct? Highview Homes in Jackson?
Yeah, it's across the street from the Rodriguez School. I forgot the first name of the
Johnson.
school.
It's across the street from Johnson School.
Johnson School, correct, yeah.
Is the question, what is the distance from this community to that community?
Yes.
Stuart, they're going to tax your technical skills.
Yeah. I'm not familiar with that project, so I'm looking for it.
It's a very big project.
So Highview Homes, it's 35-acre property on the corner of North, New Prospect, and Larson Roads. It's Jackson's multifamily affordable housing, 216 units, 17. So New Prospect. Hold on.
Stuart, if you just take Fort Plains and then you cross 195 going south, it's
it becomes Larson Road as you head into Jackson.
Okay. Oh, I see it. As the crow flies, it's 1.3 miles to those two intersections. Maybe, you know, on the road, maybe 1.5 miles.
Okay, and then just, Mr. Challoner, again, so that the board has a proper understanding and the public, what would be the characteristics of a site that would make it a site that would be included in a report versus one that would not be included? And did this site not satisfy any of those requirements?
Mr. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I was not the author of the report, so.
Nick
Oh, okay.
Federici, who is the author of the report, is our traffic engineer and is our traffic engineer of record, having been sworn and his credentials made part of the record. He is available this evening, and if we could bring him in, Mr. Federici can describe the investigation that he did, and he can identify the criteria that are required to include a project. Thank you for bringing him in.
Okay. So, Mr. Federici, when you get on, I just remind you, you remain under oath.
So, and Mr. Federici was qualified at the meeting in August as our traffic expert, the author of the report that was filed. His credentials were placed on the record, and he was found to be an expert in his field. And as you've just been reminded, Mr. Federici, you are under oath. I'm going to ask if you're comfortable asking the question that was just presented.
Absolutely.
If you would, there's a question as to what specific projects you would include in a report and what characteristics you look for to include them in a report. And concurrent with that, what characteristics do you allow to be covered with your growth generation factors that are part of your report?
Yes. So we reached out to Howell Township and got a number of developments we included. We include background growth as well. Generally, projects outside of a certain radius, matters where you are, what type of area, we're not looking into. Particularly, say 200 units. I heard this was about a 200 unit multifamily development. I know where it's located, the location there. It's just 4 ways in and out of that location. So I wouldn't anticipate more than 25 to maybe 35 of the trips from that development actually making its way past this site. Probably generates less than 100 peak hour trips. That's usually our cutoff for what we consider a significant increase in traffic. So that wouldn't be the type of development. That's why we do background growth. So we add to the growth of other types of developments, smaller developments, generally outside the area. And that's what this one would be.
And you did, in fact, have a growth factor as part of your report.
We did, as we always do, yes.
An annual growth factor.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Federici, just so I make sure that I understand, so when I'm discussing it in the resolution, the project in Jackson would generate less than 100 trips at peak, and because of that, it would not merit inclusion in the traffic study.
Correct. Yes.
And is it also the distance? Did the distance have anything to do with it?
The distance, its accessibility, as I mentioned, it's at the intersection of, it's a 4-way intersection. So there's, essentially 4 ways in and out. So you can go to 195, you can go to the west and north to get to 195. If you want to get to Route 9 north, you would go in this direction past the site. If you want to get to 195, you're not going to make it up to the site. So a lot of ways, typical commuter routes, other than Route 9 north and south, you would never drive past this site to commute.
So what would what is a distance that would have made it something that would be included in the report? Or is it just something that, changes from project to project?
It's a little more subjective, as you mentioned. Yes, Ron. It's, on the other side of 195, so that's probably one of the key factors there.
The same road.
Of not utilizing it. If it was a commercial development that generated maybe 200 or 300 trips, then we'd look at it as well. 200 units probably generates about 100 or so peak hour trips total.
Okay. I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Blue. I just wanted to make sure there was a complete way of responding to your question. You can continue.
No, I appreciate it, but I mean, Larson Road is Fort Plains in my viewpoint. It's the same road, and it's a back road to Route 9. It skips a lot of lights. It connects to the Parkway North, which is major commuting road, and I think it should have been included. And there's other developments that were included in that study that are farther out than that one. So it's skewed and inaccurate, and I think it should be redone.
Mr. Chair, if I can ask Ron a question, is my mic better?
Yes, it is.
I can-
Thank you, Mr. Castro.
Ron, is it in our purview to be able to look at other towns' applicants' traffic studies and take that into consideration?
It's within the board's purview to take anything it believes is relevant to the way traffic is going to impact this site, and particularly where that traffic might have a result in the safety or an impact to safety of ingress and egress.
I mean, unfortunately, I don't know the area, and Ryan, I'm just going to call you Ryan because I don't want to say your last name wrong, seems to know this area, and I think Nick is just making assumptions on this project. Would it be feasible to look at their reports? I'm sure there's reports available.
If I could jump in, our driveway operates at an A and a B level of service. So I could triple the volume on Fort Plains Road and still have acceptable levels of service at this driveway. And I am a resident of Howell Township, so I'm very familiar with this area. So, don't think I don't understand the area. I'm a traffic engineer. I've been doing this for 30 years. I work in Howell Township, Freehold Township, Jackson Township, every township around here on a regular basis. So I understand the traffic. I understand traffic from adjacent developments. That's why we do our best to pick up all the different projects in the area, background growth. If I thought there was any issue with capacity here, I would tell you right now, it's an A and a B level of service at the driveways. That's what we're concerned with: safety at the driveways, getting out onto Fort Plains Road. 200 unit development a mile and a half away, or 4 of those a mile and a half away, isn't going to change any of our analysis and our findings from our report.
And was that the only, and I don't know if I misheard, but there was another development that Ryan had mentioned?
That was in the Asbury Park Press. I would, let me get the article up. Here it is, page 6. Development consisting of 253 age-restricted homes known as Harvest Ridge. That's on West Farms Road. And then
I think that's built already. I think that's
It
built
is.
already, Ryan. Ryan,
Yeah,
that's built.
I'm referencing the traffic study. So if that's outside of the 1.5 miles, then that's farther out, and I believe the high view application should have been included into the study. And the second one was the 72 apartments at the corner, which was much closer. So that's obsolete in my defense. But,
So to be
yeah,
clear,
I-
you're only mentioning the one project that's in Jackson, and that should be taken into consideration.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the same road, and I'm on Fort Plains. I see a lot of cars coming from that direction.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I would take that road, to be truthful, if I could get down Route 9 quicker. That's the road to take. And that kind of brings me to my next point. Even though zoning has changed from ARE 6 to ML 12, the road system adjacent to this property known as Fort Plains is not zoned ML 12. I don't even have water, sewer, utilities on this, on Fort Plains. Fort Plains is a narrow, winding country road. It experiences flooding along the shoulders, especially in front of Oak Hill Farm. I've measured the road pavement in front of 711 Fort Plains Road. The width is 23 feet wide. I'm sure there's more narrow spots along Fort Plains, and it's unforgiving. There's trees, there's telephone poles. It's not a friendly road to drive during the nighttime or even during the daytime. People speed. There's barely, if you turn off of West Farms onto Fort Plains, you will not hit a speed limit sign until after my house, which is probably a mile down the road. FP Howell will require thousands of dump trucks and flatbed trucks delivering heavy equipment and supplies measuring, these trucks measure approximately 10 feet wide. A tandem dump truck measures 9 foot 6 inches mirror to mirror. So rounding up 20 feet, you have 3 feet of forgiveness on that road with 2 dump trucks passing each other. And along those curved roads, you can narrow that down even more so. When it comes down to it, it's not safe. The road is not zoned for this type of development. As you know, accidents happen here quite often. The last one was February 2nd, 2022, which was a head-on collision. I moved here because the zoning was a great place to live. To be surrounded by residential houses, agricultural lands, open space, large acre properties was very attractive and very Howell-like. Now I feel like I've been deceived, and that comfortable rug was pulled out from under me. As a resident of Howell, I request that Howell Township deny this application or request a revision with less homes or condos, or at least lower the speed limit down to 35 miles per hour. This is a township road, and I would look to the planning board for direction to get that speed limit dropped if this application gets approved. People like to speed on this road. 70 miles per hour is not unknown, and the police presence is not here. I didn't get a chance to look in the Oprah reports for the police stopping speeders, but it's rare. I don't see many cops out here, and it's not their fault. Howell Township is a very large township, but if you could lower that, that could save lives, and I know it would be appreciated, and it would be more comfortable with this application being approved.
Thank you, Mr. Baloo. Mr. Pape, one
Yes.
of the questions that Mr. Baloo asked was about the flooding. And if my memory serves me right, but early on in the application, I believe there was a discussion about this project actually dealing with the flooding issues that are in front of this property. Is my memory right?
It is. Mr. Challoner went into great lengths to describe the stormwater management improvements in the area. If you would like.
Would Mr. Baloo like to hear the applicant discuss how they're addressing that again?
And that's great, but it's all along Fort Plains Road. But yeah, I would like to hear that. That's fine.
Do I need to get, still sworn in, or?
Your Stuart Challoner is a design engineer. His credentials were placed on the record. He was found to be an expert in his field, and he was placed under oath. Mr. Challoner, I remind you that you're under oath. And I'm going to ask if you could do a Reader's Digest and a summary of the drainage testimony that you provided last fall.
So on the applicant's portion of Fort Plains Road, They are widening the roadway with new curb and sidewalk. The half width from center line to the new curb line will be 20 feet. From center line, the applicant's also installing drainage system along the entire length of the roadway. And a lot of that will be collected and discharged into the stormwater management system within the project site. So that it would be reduced to address the additional impervious area. So the entire length of Fort Plains Road in front of the property will be improved with drainage and roadway improvements.
Okay, thank you. And Ron, Mr. Baloo had a concern about speed limit on the roadway. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the board has any jurisdiction, but we do have council representation. Is that the proper channel to address that concern?
The proper channels is at the governing body. It's not something that we have the jurisdiction under the law to handle, but certainly, you know, if it is a local road, you know, you can go to the governing body, and the in-house engineering department also can help explain, you know, what the guidelines are and if it's something that can be accomplished.
Okay, I mean, for tit for tat, I wouldn't mind if this application got approved and the speed limit went down, I would be a happy camper.
Thank you, Mr. Baloo.
Is Miss Evelyn on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I look forward with working with you and the council on proposing that speed limit drop. This is a very dangerous road, and it's very narrow and winding. So I look forward with working with you.
And we will be very happy to do so. And as you said, most of Howell is old country farm roads. And that's how Howell was built. So we run into this issue of speed frequently and just spoke about it at Tuesday night's council meeting. So please, if you could contact me, or if you'd like to email me on the website, your contact info, I'd be happy to sit down with you, and we'll go in and talk to the appropriate people and see what we can do to assist in this. However, I did want to ask you a question. You spoke about the tandem trucks. Are you suggesting that they are or are not there at this point in time? Those trucks do travel that road presently.
They travel back and forth because there is a site on West Farms Road that loads those trucks up, and then you also have Lakehurst on the other side of it. So they're going to be going back and forth quite often. And with that narrow of a road, it's going to be, I mean, it's going to be very dangerous. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody gets very hurt, if not killed. With this
I don't mean to interrupt, but presently tandem trucks are utilizing that road, correct? Outside of, I'm just
yes,
through.
but the influx of this project is going to cause a huge increase, as you can imagine.
Sure, anytime there's a project, these trucks are bringing in supply. So you are absolutely correct in that. So let's please work together and concentrate on speed limits. I can assure you that this country road is not the only road in Howell that you know, we are looking at, and happy to fulfill, you know, anything that we can do to certainly make safety a larger priority in Howell. Absolutely.
If anybody questions it, take a nice nighttime drive down Fort Plains Road. And
I don't think you'll find anybody on council that would question it. We all reside here, and we all do the same thing. We use back roads to cut through, so we use less time on Route 9. So
I like it. Yeah, I understood. And I like it dark because there's a lot of open space. It's a greenway to Turkey Swamp. It's kind of has the essence of Howell still. There's a lot of old chicken coops, and you really do have the old culture.
I look forward to working with you.
Fort Plains. All right, thank you.
My pleasure.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Baloo. Okay, Evelyn?
Next, we have Maureen. We have Maureen Ambry.
Is she on camera, Eileen?
I'm trying to bring her in. She's
Oh,
not.
okay.
Maureen, you need to unmute yourself.
Hello?
We can
Hello?
hardly hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, all right, hold on one second. Can you see me?
Yes.
I just
No,
need
Oh,
to
you
swear
can
you
see
in
me.
first, Miss Ambry.
No, we see
Okay,
the
no
picture.
problem.
Eileen, all we have to see is the picture. We don't see her physically, like she's there in the box, but that's a picture.
Oh. I'm unfamiliar with this computer, so give. Thank you for your patience.
No, take your time.
Thank you. Oh, dear. To be able to see you. Can you see me now?
No.
Oh,
I feel like a Verizon commercial. Oh, boy. Oh, there we are.
No, that's not, they can't see.
are you on your
I'm
cell phone?
working
or
on it.
Are you on a cell phone? Or
We're on the laptop.
Top.
Lower left-hand corner, there should be two buttons. One that says stop and start video. The other one is mute and unmute your mic.
We don't have that video option, weirdly.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Chair, Mr. Pape, do you have any objections?
I'm going to defer to the board's rules and regulations and not comment on them.
Well, I just want the record then to be abundantly clear that the applicant has chosen not to comment. If you give me a moment, I can turn to the emergency regulations. I believe the emergency regulations actually speak specifically, or more specifically, to sworn testimony on behalf of an application. But again, just give me a couple moments here.
Hey, Brian, on a side note, I vote for going back to live meetings. You already have my vote.
I'm glad I could help you.
I actually like the work from
Well,
home.
this is not the time.
No, I'm just trying to
application to
fill some
discuss
time up.
that.
I'm gonna try on a cell phone, so hold on one quick second.
Thank you for your patience. I'm so sorry.
Also have that.
Ron, if the board needs to vote for just a voice, I mean, I vote yes for it if you want to take a vote.
Well, I'm just,
Yeah, it's not up to us. It's the state regulations.
Mr. Chair, maybe
Do you
so
want
that
it-
everyone can just,
Why don't,
so that we have the correct answer, if you could maybe just adjourn for 5 minutes.
I was gonna say,
That'll allow the member of the public to come back and for me just to take a look,
Yep.
okay?
yes, let's take a 5-minute break. Go grab something to drink.
The board will take a 5-minute recess. They'll be back at 8:12. The planning board will now reconvene.
Wait, Mr. Pape, Mr.
Yes.
Dorado. Okay. And did we lose Mr. Nicastro?
Oh, he was on his phone. There he is.
Talente. Eileen, do you see Ms. Talente?
No, I don't.
She texted me a few minutes ago and lost internet connection, and I believe it's because of the windstorm.
We're down to eight members.
Mhm.
Okay, just do roll call real quick, please.
Mr. Cristiano,
Here.
Mr. Dorado,
Here.
Mr. Husser,
Here.
Mr. Greenfield,
Here.
thank you. Mr. Nacastro? I think he's got trouble logging in too. Hold on.
Here.
Thank you. Councilwoman O'Donnell,
Here.
Mr. Seaman,
Here.
Mr. Spanville,
Here.
Ms. Talenti. She is not here. And Chairman Tannenhouse.
Here.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I guess we have 8 regular members. I leave it to counsel for the applicant, Mr. Pape. Does the applicant still wish us to proceed, or do you request that we wait a little longer, see if our 9th member gets in?
Oh,
Oh, wait a minute. She might be here. Hold on.
Yep.
I
Yay.
apologize. I lost internet.
Welcome
That's
back.
okay. Thank
Okay, so
you.
we have all 9, correct, Eileen?
Yes, we have 10 members, 9 voting members.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, I did have an opportunity to find a specific section. Within the administrative code, it's section 5:19-1.7C. That section is entitled Land Use Boards, Public Hearings on Applications for Development. And the last sentence in subsection C states, and I'm quoting now, individuals giving sworn testimony at a public hearing held during a remote public meeting shall appear by video in addition to audio. So that's very clear that for sworn testimony, anyone who's going to provide sworn testimony must appear via video. If that member of the public is only able to access audio, she can still ask questions because that's not testimony. And we could also leave her in the room and see if she can figure out the audio and move on and come back to her.
Fair enough. Thank you. Ms. Ambry? I see her there. Ms. Ambry? There you go.
See me? They can see you now. Thank you for doing that.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm so
Okay.
sorry. I
That's
apologize.
okay. I just need to swear you in. Do you swear or affirm
Certainly.
the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, please state and spell your name and give us your address.
It's Maureen Ambrey, Maureen Ambrey, the property owner of 700 Hulse's Corner Road in Howell.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you for your patience.
Okay, thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, I have some questions. Thank you for taking the time and for putting up with what just happened. When you had some meetings before, we talked about, or you talked about the retention pond and the basin. And my concern with that is if there is a failure of the system, what is the remedy? And I'm concerned about the flooding I kind of got a little put off by what just happened, so I apologize for that. My question to you is, I know that the town is not responsible once everything is put together in this project. So if there's a failure of the basin of any sorts, or there's any flooding, what's the remedy of the town for that? For example, if it's not maintained properly, and I know that's not the responsibility of the town, but does the town have like a yearly inspection of the basins to make sure that they are being maintained appropriately? And I know that the New Jersey DEP has come up with a new climate change. And does this project adhere to some of I know they don't have all the proposals for the new proposals of the flooding that is caused by the new climate change and the major storms that we're having. So I wonder if you could address that for me. And also, if the board would have any chance of setting up some kind of insurance that the development people would take care of. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And I was wondering if the development people would would initiate some insurance for the adhering property owners should there be some development problems with that basin.
Mr. Chair, I defer to you. As far as enforcement, I think would be an issue that could be answered by the representative of the town. I could answer some of those questions, but I can't
Well,
answer.
why
what
don't you
enforcement
see
is.
what you can answer, Mr. Pape,
Surely.
and then we'll supplement if necessary.
Surely. So there are state regulations with regard to stormwater basins throughout the state. There are annual inspections of basins that are required. This is the requirement of reports with the state. That continues. That's in perpetuity. During the construction of the basins, the applicant is required to post certain bonds with the township. Those bonds are held by the township until the project is complete, and the completion is evidenced by the township engineer inspecting and confirming that they're working properly. The basins would be owned by and maintained by a homeowners association who would be empowered and entrusted with the basin maintenance. And the association documents typically include language that states that the township does not have an obligation to maintain the basins, but it has the right to, and if it does, it has the right to tax the property owner for the benefits that were given by the township. Those are the elements of protection that the applicant is aware of and the applicant is bound to. I believe there may be more, but I would leave it to the township representatives to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Pape. Mr. Chair, I don't think there's anything else. I mean, the board has.
I think that's, pretty much addresses everything. It's beyond this board's purview and jurisdiction. But the bonding process that Mr. Pape talked about, I think is one of the most important things with regard to maintenance of the basin. But I defer, if Laura or Jen have anything extra, they want to add.
I do not.
I don't either, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And it's basically that's basically my concern for all the neighboring properties. Should anything occur, the remedy involved, especially with the way the climate change is causing problems. Obviously, the New Jersey DEP is looking into that, and they will be adhering to new regulations, which I'm sure that you're not bound by at this particular point in time. But I was just wondering if they had any thoughts and had put anything into this project that would be addressed by any future.
Mr. Pape, is your stormwater management system in compliance with New Jersey's latest regulations?
Chair, I believe that this application was initiated prior to those, but I need to, Mr. Challoner, I know that we incorporate considerable green elements, but what's the answer? Are we under the jurisdiction of the March 2021 stormwater requirements?
No, we're not, we're still under the jurisdiction of the best management practice, not the newest review, but we have incorporated some of those green infrastructure measures into this project. And in response to like if there was a flooding problem or all the drainage on this site is directed towards the wetlands. Nothing's being directed to an adjacent property or even to the road, so to speak. Everything is directed towards the large open space in the back. And the fact that we're building a wet basin, it's a very low maintenance required, other than mowing and cleaning out the outlet structures. It's a very easy project to maintain, other than the size of it. So the prospect of a large retention wet basin failing, it's designed to hold water. That's the whole purpose of it. That's how it functions and collects the pollutants before it gets discharged into the wetlands. That's why we put that design into this project to meet the new stormwater management regs.
Thank you.
That's the only question I really have for this. So thank you for the information. And again, I apologize for all the problems getting this up and running.
No worries. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Eileen, do we have anybody else to raise their hand? Eileen, you're muted.
Sorry, there's no hands raised right at this moment. If anyone else has any questions or comments, they need to raise their hand. Hold on, we have one. We have Mark Parisi.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Mark Parisi,
Hey.
2 Castle Court.
Mr. Parisi, do you swear or affirm the testimony about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
I can, well, you gave your address, but can you just state and spell your name again?
Sure, it's Mark Parisi, Parisi.
And I apologize, but I did not hear the address.
2 Castle Court.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Parisi.
Sure. I just wanted to circle back to the traffic light. I know there's been some discussion over the last few meetings about the applicant possibly making a pro rata share towards that traffic light at West Farms and Fort Plains, and that Mr. Pape had, told the board that his client was not willing to make any further contributions to that. And then Mr. Kuchar, I know that you had said that the board may have some jurisdiction as far as conditioning the approval.
So I took a look at it. I reviewed all of the ordinances that the town has. Most specifically, I took a look at the ordinance that creates this project specifically as an affordable housing project. The way that this project is codified within the township's ordinances, it does not give the planning board the jurisdiction to require a pro rata share for offsite contributions. That is likely because it has the ancillary developers agreement for the $800,000 contribution, or that's the correct number, Mr. Pape?
Yes.
And that has some specific improvements associated with it. So legislatively, the way this is put together, it didn't confer upon the planning board that power. A planning board does have the power to do so, but it has to be conferred upon it by the ordinance. This ordinance didn't, like I said, likely because of the $800,000. There was some question also about how the $800,000 was arrived at and how the particular improvements were determined. I did speak to the township attorney about that as well, and he expressed to me that the dollar amount and how the dollars would be spent was a function of recommendations that were received by the then township engineer. He's no longer with the township, but that the then township engineer came up with that dollar number and how it would be spent. And, that cascaded into not being specifically addressed in the ordinance, and again, not conferring jurisdiction on the planning board. What I will say, though, is that, if the governing body wanted to enter into a renegotiation with the developer, that some of that $800,000 could be used towards that, it certainly can attempt to do that. And I don't know, Mr. Pape, if you're prepared to address that issue tonight.
I could say this, the developers agreement that was signed in, I just want to read the date, September 5th, 2019, has very clear language about offsite contribution. There is an absolute responsibility of our client to make an $800,000 contribution. That includes buying $220,000 worth of land that was specifically identified, and the rest of the money is cash given to the town for road improvements. The spending of those monies is under the discretion of the governing body, although they did put in the agreement their intention to use it for certain roadways. It's a contract between our client and the township, and we are, as I've said more than once and will say again, we will honor our commitments to the township that are in that contract. If the governing body wanted to amend that contract to spend those dollars on other road improvements, I'm going to qualify it, not increase that number, but to spend those funds on other road improvements, I don't think that we would have any objection. But that would be something that the governing body would need to bring to our attention, and it would require an amendment to that contract. We're not comfortable initiating that, but we would be reasonable if that we were so requested. But I was not part of the negotiations. Looking through the names, I saw that Andrew Bayer was the attorney who was the negotiator of the agreement as special counsel. And I saw that James Herman was the township engineer involved, and also Brian, and I always have trouble saying his name. Is it Joan?
Gogan.
Gogan. Oh, it's so easy. Gogan. Those were the names that appear on behalf of the town in the document. But in summary, we would not be offended if the governing body asked to amend the way the monies were spent. We would not initiate it. And the $800,000 is the cap of the amount that's being contributed. I hope that's responsive.
It is, and I appreciate your response. And Mr. Kuchar, I appreciate you asking Mr. Pape for a response regarding that. As a taxpayer, when I see a project like this, where, it's evident, I think, to any reasonable individual that your client is going to, profit from, the market rate units, that there might have been, a good faith effort on your part to maybe come back to the table and increase the contribution to help offset the cost of light. But I understand that that agreement was reached with the council. And at this time, there's not going to be any change that the amount of that agreement at this time. But yeah, as a taxpayer, it would have been nice to see that there was maybe an enhancement of that amount. But that's all I have to.
Mr. Parisi, if you were there for the whole discussion beginning years ago, you would have seen that the town successfully got our clients to increase by 33% the affordable housing. We went in with 20%, which is the standard throughout the state. Your governing body and your negotiators convinced our clients to bring that up to 30%. That is the very substantial commitment that's made by our clients to the township.
Well, to that, I will say thank you for increasing the set aside to help the township to meet its affordable obligation. I appreciate that, Mr. Pape. That's all I have tonight, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Parisi.
All right. Bye-bye.
Hey, Ron, can I just ask a question for clarification based upon what Ken and you stated?
Yeah.
So there's an $800,000 contribution. 220 is already spoken for with the land acquisition, correct?
Yes.
I would defer to.
Yeah, it's actually a line item specific. Okay. It says $220,000 and identifies the the lots that have to be purchased.
So the remaining funds are to be used at the discretion of council and don't necessarily have to be used on infrastructure that may or may not be impacted by this project. So it could be used across.
That's not what I heard.
No, here,
Well,
the language is-
first, I need to say this. This is not and the board members know, but I still need to make this statement. This is not an agreement that the planning board was part of. It's between the governing body and the applicant. We were not consulted, nor were we required to be. And we didn't put any, advice into it. So with that said, I don't know how the drafters interpret the content of the developer's agreement. I mean, certainly some of the money is spoken for and earmarked. The interpretation of how the other money, can be spent, your interpretation is not unreasonable. I don't know if that's what, the drafters had in mind. So I just want to qualify it by saying, our limited role and how we might interpret it versus others.
If I may, Mr. Kuchera and Mr. Husar, I'd like to read the language. I think the language is pretty clear. And our position is this is the language that's in the contract that we've signed. We'll abide by it. If the town wanted to modify it, as long as they didn't increase the number, reasonable requests to modify it would not be offensive. But the language says the developer shall tender the offsite contribution to the township to use by the township in its sole discretion for the realignment of Sunnyside Road. This contribution will relieve the developer of any improvements along Sunnyside Road, including the portion abutting their property frontage. Furthermore, this contribution will be used by the township to improve the intersection of Sunnyside Road and Fort Plains Road, including all of the property frontage along Block 110, lots 181 and 182. That's the property that we have to buy. It is agreed that the developer shall not be obligated to pay any other offsite contribution or perform any offsite road improvements as a result of its development and or its land use approvals other than the offsite contribution. The offsite contribution is then defined as $800,000. So there's some language about where it's supposed to be spent. We're not going to stand on ceremony. If the governing body would like to spend it someplace else and would like to ask us for permission, we're not going to stand on ceremony and say no, as long as the number stays at 800,000.
Mr. Pape, can I ask a follow-up question to you, sir? It's Mark Parisi. I'm still on. I didn't sign off. I don't know if you can see me.
Well, that goes through the chairman, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
It's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Parisi.
Are the improvements at the Sunnyside intersection that we assume are going to absorb the remaining $580,000? Are those like necessary and critical improvements that need to be done in order for the traffic aspect of your project to function as you have designed it?
No, they're not. They are not improvements that are necessary for our project. They are improvements that the township asked this applicant to fund.
Okay. All right.
And we said
That's
yes.
it. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to sign off.
And just for my own purpose of information, Mr. Pape, the purchase of the land is outside of the 800,000, not included as part. So if, let's say, the land costs 200,000, there's not 600,000 left for the town to spend.
Oh, no, yeah, Mr. Chairman, our clients went out and negotiated a contract to buy that property. It's a fixed purchase price. It's $220,000. You'll see those monies being spent, and when the deed is delivered to the town, it will show that it was 220.
And that comes off of the 800 contribution.
Correct. And then the 580 that's remaining is paid to the town.
Fair enough. Thank you.
There's a program for there's another page and a half of how it gets paid to the town.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilwoman.
as I recall this situation, this property was to be purchased and was agreed upon as part of the agreement, and the monies that are remaining, to what extent all of them, some of them, or whatever that portion may be, is designed to make those properties safer. So the idea behind this, as I recall from Mr. Bear and hopefully Mr. Herman, was to ensure the safety. So this money, could it be spent somewhere else? Apparently could be. Would it be? I seriously could never see that happening. That's not any of the conversations that I recall, nor the intent. Now, this is 2019 from this agreement, so it's been a bit of a time ago, but certainly it's not intended to take this money and use it halfway across the town for a ball field. So that inclination should be stricken from the minds of anyone on this board or public.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I was going to ask Mr. Cajero, the conversation of what money is used, where it's spent, how it's done. It's great for public purposes, but for the board purposes, we don't have any jurisdiction on what the town does with what money and so forth, and in what agreements. It's black and
We
white.
were, as I stated, the planning board was not a party to this. It's a developer's agreement between the township and the developer. We're not here to speak about what the intent was, where it's going to go, how it's going to be spent. But Mr. Pape has offered in good faith that the applicant is willing to still sit at the table with the township to discuss a reapportionment of the dollar amount and the reapportionment of where the dollars go, but not a increase in dollar amount. But let me be very clear about the board's jurisdiction, and this comes from any number of Supreme Court cases. The Supreme Court uses this term when discussing the role of a planning board, that the jurisdiction is, quote, tightly circumscribed. And the role of a planning board is to determine whether the applicant has satisfied the ordinances and, making sure that they obtain all outside agency approvals. If the applicant has not satisfied all ordinance requirements, then the board is tasked with determining whether there are adequate proofs in the record to support the grant of either variance or design waiver relief. Where all ordinance requirements have been satisfied and ingress and egress is safe, a board is required to grant approval. A board can still deny an application where all ordinance requirements have been satisfied, but that's limited to instances where ingress and egress has not been proven to be safe. But our role is to really examine compliance with all ordinance requirements. And I think it was necessary to delve into what we did with the developers agreement because there was some ambiguity concerning what it did do, what it didn't do, what its impact was on this board. And I think that has been fleshed out, and I think it was necessary, but it led to the ordinance creating this piece of this project, and the governing body put into that ordinance what powers it wanted this board to have, and those are the powers that we can exercise.
Thank you. You made a statement, Mr. Cachero, that ingress and egress is something that we could use for denying an application. Do you think?
I wouldn't phrase it that way. I would say that safety of ingress and egress is relevant to every application, whether it's completely compliant or not. Not that it can be used for such a thing, but it is required of every applicant to show that the ingress and egress is safe, and where that has not been shown, a denial can be supported.
Thank you. Okay. Eileen, do we have anybody else?
I have no other hands raised at this time. You want to give it a minute or?
Yeah. Do you, it's been some time since you indicated the instructions on how to raise your hand from your phone and also how to mute and unmute yourself. Do you want to just give the rundown on those instructions real quick?
Sure. If anyone else is interested in asking questions or commenting on this application, please use the raise your hand feature. If you are calling in on the telephone, please use *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. We will keep the public open for another minute if someone raises their hand. Otherwise, the chairman will close the public portion of this hearing.
Okay, Eileen, we'll see. Is nobody raising their hand?
No, I have
All
no
right,
hands
well,
raised.
We'll close the public portion of this meeting. Mr. Pape, would you
Yes,
like to
Mr.
summarize?
Chair. I would, thank you. Thanks for that opportunity. I'm going to be brief. This application has been presented to the board through the testimony of the professionals who designed the project. You've heard substantially from Stuart Challoner and Mr. Federici. You've heard that there are no variances. You've heard that this is an application where the applicant participated with the township in a court settlement, went to court, joined in the final court order. You heard that the applicant entered into a contract with the township, referred to as a developer's agreement, and has confirmed on the record that they intend to and will abide by each and every requirement set forth in that agreement. And you've heard that the applicant has worked with the ordinances that are in place for this property, and that the project that we submit to you is consistent with the court order, the developer's agreement, and the ordinance, and is variance-free. It took us some time working with your staff to address all of the drainage concerns. We went from, I think, 57 concerns down to one that was a technical concern. The stormwater design has gone through the review of your engineer and has gone through the DEP's review. The roadway system, we have a flat and level road. We have road improvements. You heard Mr. Challoner describe them. You heard Mr. Federici describe our driveway entrance as having A and B standards. And I think he said that even if he quadrupled the traffic, it would still have a safe rating for ingress and egress. When the applicant was asked to revisit the landscape plan, notwithstanding that the landscape plan had been previously reviewed and there were no objections to it, the applicant did so, and you now have a very substantial buffer around the perimeter. And the applicant was asked to demonstrate an understanding and willingness to make certain that the stormwater system is properly built and maintained, and that there are guarantees in place for the township and the surrounding residents. We placed on the record what their obligation is. I can very safely and honestly state to the board that your applicant has taken his obligations to the township very seriously and has come forward with a project that is 100% consistent with the design, the requirements of the ordinance. I'll let one last thing. There was a waiver. We had one of our roadways went a little bit too close to a stream, and when requested to redesign and pull it back, our client actually redesigned that entire portion of the project because it was a technical request made by, I believe, Ms. Beam. So there's not a request that has been made to the applicant supported by the ordinance or the developer's agreement to which the applicant did not categorically agree. I think we all have an obligation to each other to follow what the courts have laid down, what the developer's agreement states, and what the ordinance says. And for that reason, we respectfully ask that the board grant the application as it's presented to you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board members have any other questions?
Mr. Chair, just before that, Mr. Pape, I think, correct, there are no variances, but I think there still is one design waiver, correct, for the lighting?
There's one design waiver for the lighting, and we have indicated we believe it is in the best interest for that design waiver to be granted, but if it's denied, we'll take it back.
Okay. If nobody else on the board has any other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Brian, I got a question.
Sure. Mr.
Are we
Dorado.
are we considering that additional traffic report from the other development in Jackson?
When you're saying considering an additional traffic report, I would say that you're considering whether to grant or deny preliminary and final site plan approval with the design waiver relief and the Woodlands Management Plan approval. If you find that the lack of that information would impact on the safety of ingress and egress, that may be a reason to deny. If you have a specific request with regard to that, if you want to see additional information, you can certainly ask Mr. Pape, before there's a vote. But that's how I would recommend considering it or factoring it in.
Oh, okay. He had said specifically, well, the traffic engineer did that. They didn't consider that report at all. So, I mean.
Well, it's not that they didn't consider a report. There was a property that was not included in the report. So, I mean, are you requesting from Mr. Pape that the applicant amend or revise its report to include that property?
Should it, as I'm asking you as an attorney, should it, or?
Oh, that's not a legal question. Yeah. What I'm telling you is, if you believe that information would impact the safety of ingress and egress, it's a reason to either deny or it is a reason to ask that it be included. That's as much as I can tell you under the law.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Mr. Caro, if we as board members, at least me, personally, I'm not qualified in order to make that determination. But is that something that we could ask our professionals? I mean, we heard the testimonies from the applicant's professional, but is that something that our professionals can opine on?
Yes.
Okay, is that Ms. Newman or Ms. Bean?
You could ask both.
Okay, then I think, Mr. Dorado, is that okay to ask our professionals for their opinion?
Yes.
Or whether they think it would affect the ingress and egress?
So, Mr. Chairman, what I can say is based upon the testimony we've heard, while I recognize that they have not considered that, the traffic engineer noted that there was background traffic and formulations put into the traffic report. Having said that, based upon the location of that site and the entrance and exits, he had said that even if the volume was increased by 3 or 4, the ingress would operate safely. Now, do we have that by way of formal report? The answer is no, but based upon the testimony of the applicant, they contend that based upon that development, based upon the configuration of the intersection, and based upon the number of homes proposed within there, they don't expect that would impact the level of service at their intersection, which they projected operates at a level of service A or B. Beyond that, I would defer to Jen on anything I may have missed, or if she had anything additional.
And just before you get to that, Mr. Cachero, the applicant's traffic engineer did provide that type of testimony, and as a professional engineer for the applicant, he has the right to make those statements on the record to this board. And we as board members can accept those. Professional engineers go through a lot of training and so forth to make those kind of statements. And is it fair for the board to be able to consider what that applicant's engineer said?
Yes, I mean, you are required to consider what everybody says, whether it's the professional engineer, members of the public, any interested party. You give the adequate weight to the testimony that you've heard, but you certainly consider all of it. I would throw one more option out, Mr. Chair, as something that's legally permissible. And actually, Mr. Pape, is this application for preliminary or preliminary and final?
The application is filed is for preliminary and for final.
Okay. What the board could decide if it felt that additional information was in some manner, absolutely necessary to make a final decision, you could consider granting a preliminary approval with one of the conditions being that information be added to the traffic report and, discussed at the time of final.
Great, thank you. Ms. Beam, your input, please.
I concur with Laura, while that development was not included in the analysis, I also believe that it was brought up in the context of just sheer volume on the roadway. And the testimony that was provided saying it would create less than 100 peak hour trips, it, in my opinion, would not jeopardize the safety of the access.
Thank you. Mr. Dorado, you've heard from our professionals. Does that answer your question, or do you still have concerns?
That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then I will entertain a motion if no one else has questions.
So, Mr. Chair, just the universe of possible motions to make, just so everyone's clear. There could be a motion to deny. There could be a motion to grant preliminary and final with the ancillary design waiver relief. There could be a motion to grant preliminary approval with whatever additional information the board feels is necessary. And that would include either compliance with the lighting or granting relief from the lighting requirement. Those are sort of the three that are out there for the board.
I know, Mr. Cuchero, it's not traditional for the chairman to make a motion or to respond to what the motion should be, but do I still have that right?
I interpret the law that you have that right.
Okay, then I'll make a motion to approve for preliminary and final.
With the design waiver relief?
Yes.
Lighting?
Okay.
Yeah, I think the lighting, the lighting is better for the project.
I'll second that motion.
Any other motions anybody wants to put up there? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Cristiano,
Yes.
Mr. Dorado,
Yes.
Mr. Husser,
Yes.
Mr. Greenfield,
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro,
You're muted, Rob.
I had to switch. I had to switch from my iPad to the phone, but yes.
thank you. Councilwoman O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
Ms. Talenti,
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Motion carries. Application's approved.
Mr. Chairman and board members, on behalf of Scott Caruso and personally, I thank you and good night.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night, Mr. Pape.
Okay, does anybody need to take a 5-minute break? Okay, seeing none. Okay, let's get to the next case. Case number SD-2994, Michael Hammer. Eligible voters are Mr. Dorado, Mr. Husser, Mr. Nacastro, and myself. Has anybody else certified?
Hold on one second. Yes, Mr. Greenfield, Mr. Seaman, and Ms. Talenti have all certified.
Okay,
And I'm trying to see where Mr. Herbert is, Mr. Hammer. I don't see him on here. Oh yeah, I got him. Hold on.
And also Ed Liston is the attorney.
Yeah, he's not listed on here. I don't know if he's with Mr. Hammer or not. Yes, they're all together. Okay.
Okay, Counselor?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Speak up.
By all means, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Gentlemen, my name is Edward List and I represent, I'm an attorney in Toms River. I represent Mr. Hammer. Mr. Hammer has filed a subdivision application some time ago. There were some comments received about it, and we decided that it was decided by the applicant's team that they would attempt to eliminate any bulk variances that were shown on the original plan. So we reconfigured the plan, so we have 3 conforming lots being created out of 2. We're adding another piece of property which is being melded into this scheme or this subdivision to give us the extra property that we need. So based on that, I filed a letter which sought to amend the application as you now see it. So it is in a sense, it's a different application because it includes another lot. It's really just a reconfiguration of the bulk of the property so as to eliminate any bulk variances as to lot size. I have here next to me Bill Stevens, who is our project engineer and planner. And I'm prepared to present him and best to have him sworn.
Okay, Mr. Liston, just before we get into that, there's one issue that did present itself. I believe it's in the planner's report, and I know she had a conversation with Mr. Stevens about it. There seems to be some inconsistency between the deeds for the property and the tax map for the property. Most specifically, I think, Jen, the area that includes the railroad tracks, as to whether that is its own lot or whether that has become part of the other lots. I would say, Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't decline jurisdiction tonight based upon that, because certainly it could have a profound notice impact, because that lot indicated as a railroad lot travels through the entire town. But what I would say is that if there is an approval, one of the conditions of the approval is going to have to be that that inconsistency be reconciled so that the deed and the tax map match up, so that, you know, we can confirm that the proper lots and blocks were included and that the 200-foot radius notice was correct. Okay. So with that, Mr. Liston, you can begin with the testimony.
Yeah, and Mr. Liston, if you could for a second there, just if you have an ability to adjust your mic, we're getting some high-pitched feedback every now and then. If you could just lower it just down a notch, if that's possible.
Lower the volume of the
microphone? The microphone's volume is a little too high.
Okay. Give me a second. Input level. I can't seem to adjust it, Mr. Chairman. I apologize.
Okay, the noise seems to have subsided. We'll let you know if it comes back. Please continue.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Stevens, were you previously sworn, or do you still need to be sworn for the first time now?
Mr. Kuchera, I would need to be sworn for this case. This is my first appearance on this matter.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state and spell your name.
William Stevens, Stevens, and I am a professional engineer and a professional planner licensed to practice here in the state of New Jersey
and I have appeared in that capacity before this board in the past.
Thank you. We'll accept your credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening.
All right, Bill, you got involved in this project after the original application was filed, is that correct?
Yes, we were asked to take over this project from the prior engineer and surveyor, just as a matter of trying to bring some clarity to it and hopefully move it forward to a place where the board could look favorably at this application. So what we have done, what PDS has done, is taken the original surveyor's survey, Charlie Bell. He went and updated his survey for this revised application that's now in front of the board. We have taken his boundary survey and converted that into what we believe is a fully conforming minor subdivision plan, which is before the board. I did, Mr. Cucchiaro, hear your comments about the railroad right-of-way. And one of the things that's good about PDS is that we have a very capable surveying staff. My surveyors noticed the same thing that Ms. Beam noticed and the same thing that you had pointed out when we got the survey from Mr. Bell. So we actually went and did our own research, our own title research, to determine that Mr. Bell's survey is correct and that Mr. Hammer owns to the center of the railroad tracks. The tax map for Howell Township is incorrect as far as where it shows that lot is. The railroad does have an easement across the property. It's not that they can't continue to exist there, they can. However, there is no lot there. They only have an easement across Mr. Hammer's property.
Well, I would just reiterate that just needs to, if there's an approval, that needs to be worked out so that the two documents are in harmony with each other.
No
The
problem.
tax map and
Yeah.
survey.
We would certainly agree to that and to have it vetted through the municipality surveyors just to show that they agree. It is crystal clear. There is a deed, filed deed from Mr. Hammer and the railroad and an agreement between them. So it is crystal clear.
Okay.
All right, Bill, can you begin your testimony by telling the board what you analyzed in this project when you first took a look at it and what changes you thought were appropriate to bring it more into compliance with what we believe would be a better project?
So the project as it was presented to me, the original plan that was presented to this board was seeking variances for what is known now as proposed lot 31.05. I believe they were looking for 0.6 of an acre of a variance in the ARE6 zone. So what we did is looked at reconfiguring the lands that Mr. Hammer owns so that we end up with 3 6-acre lots fully conforming to the ARE6 zone requirements.
And can you tell us what changes you made in terms of the layout in order to achieve that?
Yeah, so most particularly what allowed us to achieve that additional 0.6 of an acre was adding in existing lot 43, which is a piece of property that Mr. Hammer owns along Maida Lane. That was added to what is now known as new lot 31.03, which gave us the additional area we needed so that we ended up with 3 6-acre lots, whereas before they were short to 0.6 of an acre to make up new lot 31.05.
And is there anything else that you did in terms of work on the project to adjust lot lines?
We did reconfigure the interior lot line slightly. In other words, the lines between 31.04 and 5 were moved, obviously, so we have 2 6-acre lots. And then the lot line between 31.03 and 31.04 were slightly reconfigured to take into account some of the concerns raised by the board in the past. And of course, then we're adding in lot 43 into 31.03. So those are the changes that we made to the minor subdivision plan.
All right, now as you got into the project, you learned what Mr. Hammer was seeking to do with this property and how he sought to keep it in its present condition as a farm. Can you elaborate a little bit on what he told you about that?
Yes, Mr. Liston, I'd be happy to. So first and foremost, the existing property is an existing farm in the ARE6 zone. It is basically used for hay. The open fields are hayed, and there are some greenhouses on the property that are used to grow flowers. So Mr. Hammer wishes to continue the farm uses of this property, and that is his underlying goal. The reason for the subdivision really is to create new lot 31.05, to create a building lot for himself so that he could sell his existing home in Howell Township, which he has lived in since 1969, and build a new house on the farm for himself on lot 31.05. He believes that moving to the farm will give him a better ability to manage this farm, and the funds raised from the sale of his existing home will allow the farm to continue into the foreseeable future. That is his intention, to continue this farming operation.
Now, as far as the layout on new lot 31.05, the layout is designed to accommodate a small single-family house, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Has he gotten any approvals for any of the things he'll need in order to do that?
Yes, he has gotten a Monmouth County Board of Health approval for the septic system for the new home, and he's also gotten an approval from the NJDEP to permit the home to be built in an area that they see as freshwater wetlands, although it is presently a hay field.
Now, is there anything else that you want to add to your presentation before we go through the letter reports from the engineer and the planner?
So I guess the only other thing really to talk about, both the planners and engineers reports call out the need for variances for this property. And all those variances that are being called out in the review letters relate specifically to the greenhouses that exist on the farm. And it's my understanding that the greenhouses are unregulated structures that a farmer has the ability to put up without obtaining a building permit. Further, in looking at the State Right to Farm Act, greenhouses are permitted to be erected on farms, provided that the underlying zoning permits the use, which would be agriculture. So in this case, the permitted use of agriculture is there. So the greenhouses are permitted, but they are not regulated. They are temporary structures that a farmer has a right to put up when and where he sees fit without building permits.
Okay, I'll call your attention to a publication, joint publication from the New Jersey Department of Agriculture in consultation with the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, dated June 2015. That's the revised date, entitled Fact Sheet for Temporary Greenhouses under the New Jersey Uniform Construction Code. And does that document indicate what you just told us, namely that these are not viewed as structures under the Uniform Construction Code, and so their presence on the property should not be considered as any type of coverage or anything else, since they're not structures?
Right, it would be my opinion that they do not need to meet setbacks or coverage requirements, and they would be exempt from that. That would be my opinion.
So if the board and its professional staff agree with that opinion, then the variances that were called out, are C variances. If that opinion is not accepted by the board, we don't need variances if the board accepts that opinion. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yes.
Now, it would only leave us then with no variances. We would just have some waivers.
That would be correct, yes.
All right. At this point, let's go through the engineer's report first.
Okay, referring to a letter from CME Associates dated February 9, 2022, signed by Ms. Newman, the planning board engineer.
And it has a project description and gives the history of the project as it originally began and then as it was amended. Nothing on, that's just information. On the second page talks about the minor subdivision, what we're seeking to do. Zoning compliance is called out. And is it in that zoning compliance table that the variances first make their appearance by way of, I believe it's coverage and being within a setback?
So yes, on page 2, we're talking about setbacks to the greenhouses listed as either existing conditions or a created variance because we have a subdivision line close to some of the greenhouses located in the southern portion of the farm. And then on page 3 goes on to talk about maximum building coverage variances, again relating to the greenhouses.
All right, and there's a note on an existing condition. Minimum front yard setback, where the existing building, proposed lot 31.03 and 31.04.
There's also General Tso's chicken.
Pardon me? I'm sorry, was there a question?
No, somebody was just talking to someone else.
Okay, fine.
By all means, please continue.
The existing condition, which is going to remain, I don't believe requires a variance since it's been there for a considerable period of time. It's there. Want to comment on that?
So again, the existing condition that we talk about under point A on page 3 of Ms. Newman's letter talks about setback variances being required of 97.5 feet and 65 feet respectively. Again, they're both the greenhouses, temporary structures.
Okay. And the other variances, A and B, well, those are the A and B that you're talking about.
So again, yes, those 2 variances also refer right back to the greenhouses.
So the applicant has not requested any design waivers of the subdivision. However, the following design waiver appears to be necessary, and that deals with sidewalk and curb. Is that correct?
That is correct. We are seeking waivers for providing curbs and sidewalks along Oak Glen Road, the project frontage. This is, as I said earlier, in the ARE 6 zone, so it's a very large lot zone meant to be kept rural in character. And I believe that curbs and sidewalks along the frontage of this property would be out of character of the neighborhood. There are no adjoining curbs and sidewalks located anywhere along this section of Oak Glen Road, and I don't believe should be required for this project.
It then goes into the RSIS, there's a list of things that the applicant is going to have to adhere to. Would you want to comment on those?
So moving on then to page 4, the top of Ms. Newman's review letter talks about residential site improvement standards and states that the minimum shoulder width of 4 feet would need to be required along Oak Glen Road. It is an existing municipal road. We are not proposing any changes to Oak Glen Road. The farm will continue to operate the way it always has, with the exception of at some point in the future, Mr. Hammer hopes to build a new house for himself on the property, which again would have to come in for engineering approval to the township should we get to that place. I took some rough measurements looking at, for me, the fog line, the white line that runs along our edge of Oak Glen Road is approximately 4 feet from the pavement. So more or less we meet that design. However, we're not proposing any changes to Oak Glen Road. And then the sidewalk construction on both sides of the street, there is no sidewalk on the opposite side, nor in my opinion, will we be required to do that, but we are seeking a waiver from putting sidewalks on our side of Oak Glen Road.
Okay, and then the paragraph 4 on page 3 talks about some of the things that we should be prepared to discuss with the board. Can you go through those?
Yeah, so 4A asks for the subdivision history of the tract. There was a prior subdivision done of this property, which created existing lots 3101 and the property that we're looking at subdividing here. That subdivision was approved by the planning board of Howell and was filed by deed in 1997. So it's some 25 years ago. I believe the comment really, and this goes more to Ms. Beam's review letter, which we'll get to in a minute, talks about whether or not this could be considered a creeping major subdivision. So we are taking 3 residential lots and making 3 residential lots out of them. We're not creating any new lots with this subdivision. So based upon the passage of time, the 25 years since the last subdivision, and the fact that we're not violating the minor subdivision requirements in Howell Township, I would say that it is not a creeping major subdivision.
Can I just ask a question, Bill?
Sure.
So the date of the prior subdivision, whether or not it's creeping a major is irrelevant, but you're saying that this subdivision, the prior subdivision subdivided the property into 3 lots, and this is another 3 lots, or I need you to go back through that again.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Bean, if that wasn't clear. So the prior subdivision took lot 31 and created lot 3101 and 3102, which are part of this. So we're seeking to subdivide those lots into 1 further lot. So at the end of the day, we have 3 lots in total. So the prior subdivision created 2 lots. Now we're taking and creating 3.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on point 4B asks, what is the principal use of the property? And as I said earlier in my testimony, it is agriculture, and that is the intention. The intention of the subdivision, hopefully should the board look favorably to grant it, is so that the agricultural use could continue here. Mr. Hammer could reside here and keep the haying operation he currently has, as well as the greenhouse operation he has, growing flowers.
Can I just, when you say agricultural, and you also talk about the Right to Farm Act, isn't the Right to Farm Act specific in that it has to be a commercial agricultural program? I'm just looking at the state's guidebook for it. It says to be eligible for Right to Farm Act protection, a farm must be a quote commercial farm as defined in this act. This includes criteria related to size, farmland assessment, and annual production.
I think, Mr. Kuchera, that is a very good point. So then I believe this would be classified under your definition as a commercial farm, because the hay operation provides hay off of the farm, and the greenhouse operation provides flowers off of the farm, and the farm is assessed. It is farmland assessed.
Well, it's not.
Not
because
anymore.
You are dividing it up, but it's, one of the elements is not just what you're producing, but the value of what you're producing. Can you tell me what the dollar amount is that is being taken in by this commercial farm? Because that is an eligibility criteria under the Right to Farm Act.
Well, yes, it is, but that is something which has to be judged by the township tax assessor. And
No, I wouldn't say so. I think that the farmland assessment is judged by the tax assessor. Right to Farm Act eligibility, I think, probably falls within the county agricultural board.
well, I believe that those criteria have been met over the course of the years. Otherwise,
What is the criteria that has been met? That's what I'm asking. What makes it a commercial farm? What criteria has been satisfied?
That you have to earn to qualify.
I believe that is the minimum amount that you have to earn to qualify has been shown every year that we've had this assessment. I don't know.
But I'm talking about the Right to Farm Act, not the assessment. The assessment is part of the Right to Farm Act, but the Right to Farm Act has very specific dollar amounts that are associated with it. What are the dollar amounts? There's testimony that there's no variance relief necessary because it's protected under the Right to Farm Act. The Right to Farm Act has specific eligibility criteria. I'm asking you to tell me what the eligibility criteria is and that it's been satisfied.
Well, I don't have the Farm Act in front of me, and if you want to tell me what you think.
I don't want to tell you anything. You made a statement, not you, but your professionals made a statement that it is satisfied. They must have reviewed something in order to come to that conclusion.
No,
So what was reviewed?
I think what the statement was that under the Farm Act, it went to the issue of the greenhouses. The greenhouses, whether or not if it's on farm property, this is a farm, the greenhouses do not count as structures.
So to that end, that is not how Howell Township views greenhouses. When this issue came up in my prior conversation with Mr. Stevens, I looked into it and spoke with the land use administrator and zoning official, and they 100% are calculated in coverage as well as setbacks.
I don't think that's consistent with the.
Dame, if I could just interject here, are we having a conversation here about setbacks because this applicant is looking to split this property up into 3 lots? And
Yes.
You've got greenhouses that actually cross now one new lot, and so that, are you saying that the greenhouse needs to be moved so there's proper
No.
setbacks?
No, well, the greenhouses are not, the lot line does not go through the greenhouse. When the application came the last time, that was part of the issue. But the lot line now runs down, and I will admit, when I spoke with Bill, it wasn't clear to me initially until we walked through the subdivision line. It no longer goes through the building, but they're too close to the road and they're too close to that side lot line that's being created with the subdivision. In addition, if you calculate up the area, the maximum permitted building coverage in this zone is 3%, and they would exceed that as well. So, you know, and then, so I agree with Ron, you know, the justification that you're claiming why these are exempt is under right to farm. So I think that, you know, I myself am not 100% convinced that that's just inherently afforded to anybody. And I feel that it was on a larger farm, and now the farm is being cut up, and how applicable that would be to that as well is also something I think that would go towards whether or not I don't think you just get to subdivide the property and all the things that come along with it with respect to the farm automatically transfer. For example, the assessment, now you have 3 lots, you know, they have to be re-reviewed. And usually it takes 3 years. You have to provide 2 years of information, and in the 3rd year you get the new assessment. It doesn't just automatically translate to new lots after you cut them up. In addition, the area that we were talking about that, you know, is associated, any wetlands or and things like that on the new lot that you're talking about building the house would come out when they're evaluating whether it qualifies for farmland. And if you don't maintain the minimum area, I'm not saying you can't cross and you can't get permits to do whatever, but if you don't maintain the minimum area, that lot wouldn't qualify. So I don't think it's just inherent that, you know, it is a farm now, and so all these rights that you maintain are afforded to that larger lot just simply translates down once you subdivide the property.
Well, I don't believe it's a farm I don't believe the subdivision is going to affect the property on the whole tract that's actually farm. The same amount of property.
I guess why, I mean, if you're going to continue to operate it as a farm with the 3103 and 3104 working together as one farm, why subdivide it? Why not just subdivide it into 2 lots, one for the house and the larger lot for the farm? Why you have 3 lots?
Well, we have 3 lots because we have the opportunity to ultimately, if at some point in time, it may cease to become a farm. Not as long as Mr. Hammer owns it, or not as long as it's in his family, but ultimately, I think we're trying to lock in the fact that we have 3 properties here, each one of which will meet or exceed the minimum lot size in the zone. I don't think that has anything to do with the farming, as long as we aren't seeking variances as we were before for one lot to be a little bit small. So I think we're entitled to create these lots. I don't think these lots have anything to do with the farming. The same property is going to be farmed that's being farmed now. So I'm not quite sure what your point is.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I don't think they get to have it both ways. We don't get to come in and say, this is a farm, and so we're entitled to have greenhouses under the right to farm, which they can't demonstrate that they comply with, and that they're unregulated structures, and then say, well, we want 3 lots because in the future it may cease to be a farm. I'm just, you just can't have it both ways. They can't present to you factual testimony that says this qualifies under right to farm and the greenhouses are unregulated. To Jen's point, we're creating 3 lots here, 2 of which, 3103 and 3104, would continue to have greenhouses. If they're going to continue to operate as one farm, why are we creating 2 different lots? One of which, admittingly, and I concur with Jen, we don't recognize that a greenhouse is an unregulated structure. Our ordinance doesn't say that. So they're creating setback or variance relief associated with it. So I guess in short, I heard Mr. Liston's rebuttal to Jen's comments, but again, I just don't think it's fair for them to get it both ways. Mr. Cucchiaro asked very pointed questions. They testified that this qualifies under right to farm, but they can't give us the factual backup when we're prompted with the question. They were then asked, why then, if 3103 and 3104 are going to remain a farm, why are we creating 2 lots? Now it's, well, in the future, it may cease to be a farm. In fairness to this board, they can't come in with something that is seeking a variance under our ordinance for a greenhouse. They can't demonstrate that they comply with right to farm and that it is in fact an unregulated structure, and then say, but in the future, it may not be a farm.
Well, I think we have a right to create minimum lot size lots in the zone. Has nothing to do with how we're using it. It's all being used for farmland.
Well, right, but what we're saying is you need relief. Like you're sitting here saying you're allowed to do whatever you want because it's a farm. That very well may be the case if you can prove it, but you haven't. So let's just go back to the 3 lots. Those greenhouses need relief. You need relief for front yard setback, you need relief for side yard setback, and you need relief for coverage. And I agree with Laura, our ordinance does not absolve those structures of getting relief. So you can remove one, which would get you down to the coverage, and move them, which would solve the setback issues, or you have a very qualified individual sitting next to you who could provide testimony as to why the benefit of leaving them outweighs the detriment. That's up to you. But I agree with Laura. I am going to submit to the board that those structures require relief. They can take what I say, or they can take what you say. It's up to the board. But at the end of the day, my position is those are not there as of right, and they need relief.
Okay, let me just answer that in this way. I don't believe they qualify as structures at all under any sense of the word, because they don't have foundations. They're temporary. Now, if you think that they do, then we need the relief. And we can provide testimony as to that relief, which is tied to their use as part of the farm. I think it would be unfortunate if we had to move one. They're not permanent, and they can be moved, but it's coming into planting season, and if we have to move it, then we're gonna lose the use of one of them for the entire planting season. That's not fair. So under the circumstances, Mr. Stevens, can you give us the background of your understanding of those
Before you
and their use?
before you get to that, sir, I'd just like to ask my professional a question. In all the back and forth, I got a little bit confused. I don't know if it was Ron, Laura, or Jen. One of you spoke to the town, and it was the opinion of the town that these structures were not considered temporary. They required, they're considered I guess what am I looking for?
They're regulated structures.
Thank you, well, that was what, regulated
And
construction.
and those structures are
And who-
regulated on our ordinance. Matt Howard.
Matt Howard, okay.
Yep.
And Matt Howard is who in the town? Just so
He's
that
the
everybody knows.
land use administrator, zoning officer, and he's responsible for, zoning compliance.
So he's it, I mean,
That's it, yep.
Okay, fine.
and we can keep going round and round about what it is, but he's unfortunately who the board has to listen to, and our professionals found that out. So if you could please continue with your testimony, I guess Ms. Beam gave you 2 or 3 options. We're happy to listen.
Fine. And incidentally, I checked my notice. My notice has the usual catch-all, any other variances required by the board. So this isn't going to create a notice problem. Bill, can you go over the C2 variance criteria and tell us if you believe as a planner that these greenhouses fit into that and that we're entitled to the relief?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Liston. So I will get into that, and we certainly don't want to argue with the board, but to me, this is a crystal clear thing. The state is very clear on how greenhouses are permitted. They don't require building permits, so but I'm not going to argue that. We'll just simply agree that what your town is saying is correct, and that we do need these C2 variances, which would be a C variance. So we would then be looking for variances for minimum front yard setback of 97.5 feet to the first greenhouse located on the southernmost lot, which is 31.03. And we would be looking for a setback variance of 65 feet to the greenhouse that is located on lot 31.04. We would also be looking for a side yard setback of 6.5 feet to the greenhouses that are located on 31.03. So those are the setback variances we'd be looking for. We also would be looking for maximum building coverage variances for lot 31.03, again, counting in the greenhouses. So being a C2 variance, we'd have to show some reason why the deviation of your zoning ordinance would enhance the purposes of zoning and your master plan. So reading directly from your ordinance under the ARE6 zone, basically the township master plan and your zoning ordinance state that the goals of the ARE6 zone are for the preservation of agricultural use. And as I had said in my earlier testimony, the whole intention here is for Mr. Hammer to be able to build a house on this farm, and so that this farm can continue into the foreseeable future. So I believe we certainly have good reasons for the grant of the variance. And as far as any negative criteria would go for the grant of the variances have existed, or the greenhouses themselves have existed here for some time. There would be no change to the way the property looks should the board see favorably to granting the variances. So in my opinion, there would be no substantial detriment to the zone plan or the zone ordinance through the grant, just the opposite. It would give us the preservation of this agricultural use, which is a stated goal and purpose of your master plan and of your municipal ordinance.
Okay. I believe the next, I think 4C talks about the railroad lot, and you've indicated that we have the information we need to correct that, and you'll be working with the tax assessor on that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
We believe the map, the way we show it, is correct.
Okay. D, the use of the proposed 18-foot wide access easement from Oakland Road to 32. Can you address that comment?
So there is an isolated lot located behind the farm known as lot 32. We do show an access easement to that lot from Oakland Road to provide access to it. Presently, it is not used for farming. It is simply a vacant piece of wooded property.
And again, the curb and sidewalk and street trees, widening right away, et cetera. I believe you've addressed that already. Is that correct?
We are seeking waivers from improving Oak Glen Road based on the rural nature of the proposed development.
Bill, can we just go back to that easement for a second? Did you calculate the area of that gravel easement in your coverage calculations?
I did not, is again, I don't believe that a farm road would qualify as coverage, but we certainly could do that. And then if we were to do that, if we were to take that look at this, that would increase our lot coverage to 7.5%, where 5% is permitted in the zone.
Mr. Stevens, what's the use of lot 32?
Currently, right now, there is no use. It is a vacant wooded piece of ground.
So this access drive that you just said you didn't consider into the coverage because you associated it with a farm use, but the rights to this access easement are actually to lot 32, which is not currently a farm use. Is that correct?
There's a woodland plan for the whole parts of the property.
It is part of a woodland plan, so it is part of the farmland that is part of this farm. But it's not being actively farmed. It's considered woodland, which is also something which.
There's a woodland plan that is approved.
There's an approved woodland plan.
State forester.
By the state forest.
Oh, who owns lot 32?
It's owned by Mr. Hammer's wife.
Okay, so
It's the
again,
same family.
still confused because Mr. Stevens testified it's for a farm use. Now it's for a woodlands use.
The woodlands use is part of the farm use.
On lot 32?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, it's my opinion that the gravel driveway, which is providing access to lot 32, which is not a subject of this application, is subject to the coverage requirements of our ordinance.
And therefore adding, are you stating that they'll need additional relief?
Yes.
Well,
Boy, this is a real mess, this application, isn't it?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes.
just for the sake of time, listen, we can't even determine that this is farmland. In reality, we hear 3 greenhouses are on the property and no testimony what's really in those greenhouses. We have flowers, but we don't know if it's a commercial use. Listen, we have a site review committee. Maybe the suggestion is that we have a site review done on this property to see what's going on there. We don't know if there's equipment stored in these greenhouses. There's a long history of things that I'm not going to bring up, but I'm not prepared to vote on this. And I know we have a lot of applications. So if we could get a site review out there to look at this, see what's in these greenhouses, come back, get a little better idea. I would say that we make this applicant come back. I mean, he has a right to testify and finish, but I'm just not comfortable. There's just too much history on it.
Aside from what Mr. Nicastro is talking about, I think there are a few other legal issues that, in all fairness, I think the applicant should have some time to review, and if it wishes to submit something. The first is their preemption argument as to whether the township's ordinances are preempted by the use. And there are cases that talk about that in the Right to Farm Act context, the Franklin v. Den Hollander case being one of them. To the assertion that it is a commercial farm and entitled to the Right to Farm Act protection, I think they need a better handle on what the elements are or the characteristics are that would allow you to claim the Right to Farm Act preemption or protection. And then, I disagreed with Mr. Liston as to jurisdiction to raise these issues. I still think that there may be a role for the county agricultural board to play here as to whether it is or is not a commercial farm, and whether they are following best management practices, whether the minimum dollar amounts are being satisfied. So I think that the applicant having, a due process afforded to them, to respond to those legal issues, which are very fundamental to this application, would be useful not only for themselves, but it would be very useful for the board. And obviously, we can't get into that kind of depth tonight, from what I can understand from the responses to the questions. Not that additional time they wouldn't be able to have really comprehensive responses and maybe submit something to the board in advance. I think that would behoove everybody involved in the process, in addition to what Mr. Nicastro is stating.
I don't disagree with that. Now, are you suggesting that the board is going to refer this application to the county farm board?
No. What I'm saying, Mr. Liston, is, we're willing to hear what your legal position is, or what the applicant's legal position is, as to whether this is the proper board to consider certain issues, whether the Right to Farm Act does really apply, and what are the preemption issues that are associated with it, along with whatever other legal issues you would like to raise. But I think there are very significant issues as to how this board, the county ag board, deal with the issue if there's a dispute as to whether it's a commercial farm, whether this board even has the jurisdiction to consider that, and also how the preemption process works. And if there are certain prior approvals or documents you would like to have in the record to supplement the arguments, certainly that is welcome and encouraged.
Yeah, you do that, but what is the preemption issue you're raising? I'm not sure I'm clear on that.
Well, no, you raised the preemption issue, or Mr. Your engineer did, that the local ordinances are preempted by the Right to Farm Act, and that
Sorry, the local board, I didn't hear you.
The local ordinances are preempted by the Right to Farm Act, and that the setbacks wouldn't apply to the greenhouse because they're part of the farming operation.
Well, I think we're beyond that point now, because we've agreed that we're going to follow the direction of your zoning officer. We're going to treat them as buildings for coverage purposes and also for setback purposes, and we're asking for those variances. I think that eliminates.
So then I want to be very clear for the record, so that it doesn't come up later. The applicant is waiving any arguments that he may have with regard to the protections afforded by the Right to Farm Act?
No, he's not doing that. But what I think you're confusing the issue, because the Right to Farm Act was brought into play because it provides, through what the engineer testified, that these types of greenhouses are exempt from normal construction regulations.
But then when I asked your engineer, why is it covered by the Right to Farm Act? There are specific criteria. What criteria are they? There was no answer. So what I'm saying is, if you're going to assert the protections of the act, there needs to be something in the record to show that the act that provides those protections actually applies. So what I'm saying is, I think that your client should have the opportunity to provide the board, with, and Mr. Stevens referenced certain sections of statutes or administrative codes that he looked at. I think that, your client would benefit from, having that in a document that's submitted to the board, so that the board could see it and perhaps agree with it, perhaps not, but I think that it would be useful.
Well, I ask a question as well. And again, I don't want to go off that issue, but I also don't want to have it get lost. Just from a planning perspective, hearing that lot 32 is owned by the applicant's wife and it's a landlocked parcel, maybe they should also consider including that so that it would have proper frontage on a roadway, as opposed to extending the easement. They said it's part of this farm, I know it's among the things that we're looking to get additional information on, but it just seems to maintain a landlocked parcel if it's owned, in fact, by his wife. I understand it's under different ownership, but the testimony was it's owned by his wife and it's a landlocked parcel. I just also wanted to ask about that.
I mean, certainly. go ahead.
I don't understand what exactly you're suggesting we do with that. Are you suggesting we put in a permanent easement?
You're proposing a permanent easement. When I asked about what the use of lot 32 was, I was told it wasn't a farm initially. Then we were told it was a farm. When I asked who owned it, you guys testified that Mr. Hammer's wife owns it and that it's all part of the farm operation. While being
It's the woodland portion of the farm, yeah.
understood, but it's part of the farm. So understanding that that is a landlocked parcel that doesn't currently have access, it may make sense to make it part of this application so that in fact we could have lots and not continue to have a landlocked parcel.
Well, we're not proposing to add it to the subdivision because it's not being subdivided.
And Ms. Newman, correct me if I'm wrong, if I understand the testimony, because it's landlocked, it requires a road easement, and this road easement is also forcing another variance to be required for this property because they now exceed the lot coverage requirements. Did I understand that testimony right?
That's correct. And Mr. Chairman, obviously, I don't want to belabor the point. The applicant's coming back. We'll check the tax records. My concern is that it's a landlocked parcel that now through testimony, we understand is affiliated with this farm. I recognize that from a planning perspective, they're providing a permanent easement to it, but that easement is also driving some of the relief with this application. To me, it would make sense to include it so that we wouldn't continue to have a landlocked parcel. Because as was noted by this applicant, sometime down the road, there may be alternate plans for these lots. It's strictly what it is. I don't want to belabor it any further. We can look at the tax records to confirm ownership and they can proceed with the application as they see fit.
Well, I don't think it would be proper to add it to this application because then we're gonna hear, well, now you've got 4 lots in the subdivision and you need a major.
She's suggesting merging it with lot 3104, because number one, it's 2 acres. So it's undersized and it's landlocked. And if you merged it with 3104 would just get a little bit bigger. I think that's what the suggestion is.
Right.
It's not adding it to the subdivision.
That's fine, but that's not what I heard, and now I'm hearing it. So we will take that under consideration. We may very well want to merge that in, I don't know. There may be also other issues having to do with financial planning and estate planning that govern why it is in his wife's name.
So Ms. Newman, it's also a positive benefit that it may reduce and remove that variance of lot coverage.
That is correct. And then we would not continue to have a landlocked parcel in perpetuity.
Okay. You're worried about landlocked. I'm worried about lot coverage.
Correct.
Just to make the record clear, what I'm concerned about.
And Brian, I just want to throw another issue out there, which I've never seen discussed on this parcel, is the historic use of agricultural. I mean, if we're going to have a residential use on one of these lots, is the plan to do the full sampling for historic pesticides, the metals associated with it, the history of this property with runoff? It could affect that residential property. Going farm issue is one thing, but my recommendation is this whole subdivision should be environmentally investigated.
And I think, Nick, that was a recommendation that came out of the Environmental Commission as well.
It is.
Reports for this subdivision.
Yeah, it was mine.
Environmental Commission had no comment.
I didn't think that the Environmental Commission had any comments on what I saw.
I'm looking at it. This was, though, they have more than one review. So you have to look at more than one letter. So there's one that's dated June 9th, 2021. Due to the historical agricultural use of the property, it is requested that the entire proposed subdivision be sampled for pesticide evaluation before approving a subdivision intended for residential use.
That would only apply to the one lot. Is that correct? Because the lot that it's going to be used for residential use.
Well, again, we keep hearing that we don't know what the future would hold. I think it would be advantageous to know what if there are any issues, if, there's a possibility it turns into something other than a farm in the future.
Well, there's only one lot that's being proposed for residential use.
I understand that.
So what you're saying is we have to do the whole farm with that test?
I'm not saying you have to do anything. It's just a recommendation.
I don't think that, I don't think that's something which we're required to do under the law. I would agree with you that if there's one lot that is going to be used for residential purposes in the future, and that is by the testimony, then we should certainly have that tested.
Yep, and it
I
sounds
would
like.
I would then
it
submit,
sounds-
Mr. Chair, and that's perfectly fair, but we heard testimony as to what these other lots may or may not happen in the future, and so if I would submit that a condition of the subdivision,
Right.
that if any of those, if lot 3103 or lot 3104 transition away from the agricultural use to become solely residential, that the testing have to be done prior to any CO be issued.
That's
Oh, that's
correct.
fine, I don't have a problem with that. That's fine. I just don't think we have to test the whole parcel now. Certainly the lot that will have to be, or is proposed to be used now residentially, we'll have to test that lot.
I would concur with our professionals that seems reasonable. Nick, does that sound like a reasonable?
Yep.
Something for the environmental commission. Thank you.
Okay, fine,
Okay,
we'll do that. Anything else?
anything else? I'd like to go back to this 4-foot thing. What is this extra 4 feet on Oak Glen Road that seems to be required if it becomes residential use? Is that because the road's just not wide enough and there's a?
I don't understand the question.
Ms. Newman, could you?
Yeah, it has to do with
explain,
the RSIS, and the RSIS states that there should be a minimum shoulder width of 4 feet along a roadway of this classification. I think what Mr. Stevens indicated is he believes it may be there. We did not see that there was adequate shoulder, but it states in RSIS that there should be a 4-foot shoulder off the white line that you may call of the lane that would extend.
Is that something that could be uncovered during the site plan review that Mr. Nicastro recommended?
Yes.
And that pertains to the lot which is proposed to be used residentially, is that correct?
And I would, yeah, Ms. Newman, would you agree to the same requirements that if any of the other lots become residential, they need to make sure they comply with all those RS?
That is correct.
Oh, sure, that's obvious. Yes.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Castro, it sounds like you got your wish. We're going to get the site plan review committee out there.
Applicant agrees, right?
Yep. Is that they just coordinate that through Eileen's office?
Yep.
Okay. So those on the site plan committee?
How often does the site plan committee meet?
Oh, they'll just tell you what their times are that they're available. They'll coordinate that through Eileen. And you
Okay,
guys
fine.
be out there at the site.
Fine.
Anything else?
Yeah, also I think part of what should be addressed from Mr. Stevens' testimony, and I was just looking at it. So 4:1C-28, and I'm just reading from Cox's book, does appear to exempt agricultural buildings from building code requirements on farms located in a farmland preservation program. But such buildings must meet criteria developed by a land grant college or a recognized organization of agricultural engineers and approved by the State Agricultural Development Committee. So it's not like a free for all. You just get to put anything up that you want. So I would just, recommend you take a look at, the totality of that section, to see whether it supports the argument that it's even beyond the building code requirements.
We'll do that.
All right. So, who is on our site review committee?
Give you 1 second.
I am.
Site Review Committee is Nick Husser, Rob Seaman, and Paul Dorado.
Okay, so I asked you guys, how quick do you think you guys can get out there? There's a consent from the property owner. So it's really, I'm just looking for timing as to when we
I
can
could be out there
place
next
it on
week.
the next agenda.
If it
Okay.
works for Rob and Paul, I could be out there next week.
Yeah, I'm around next week.
Yep,
Okay.
I have enough flexibility next week to make it work.
So if that happens, Mr. Liston, and I want to give you whatever opportunity you need to submit, legal arguments with regard to issues that were raised. If we put you on at our next meeting, would that be would that be okay from a timing perspective?
When is the next meeting?
Our next meeting is March the 3rd, 2022.
That's gonna be a little tight in terms of doing some
Okay.
legal
No,
work.
that's fine. That's why I asked. How about the second meeting, Eileen, in March?
That's March 17th.
How does that sound, Mr. Liston?
That's my national holiday. I'm Irish.
So that's a no?
If you go beyond that and we go back to regular meetings in April, you may have to renotice.
No, we haven't made that decision yet. And
No, I'm
and
just,
yeah, it's up to the applicant. It's his application. So if you want to be on in April, you can be on in April.
No,
I have April 7th or April 21st
no,
available.
I think, given the tenor of what's happened this evening and what we've learned, I think we're gonna take the 17th.
Okay. March
I'll need it.
17th.
I need an extension of time as well.
Got it. I'll send you an extension of time. I suspect that probably I'll make it through the end of April.
Thank you.
Okay, so the application of Michael Hammer, case number SD 2994, be carried to the board's March 17, 2022 meeting. That meeting is a virtual meeting that will begin at 7 o'clock. All documents associated with that application will be on file at the Township Planning Office and available for inspection on the Township's website. There'll be no further notice to property owners. The meeting begins at 7 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
is it possible that we could take you up on your 5-minute offer now?
yes. Well, I mean, it's 10 o'clock. Do we want to call it a night or do we want to hear?
Well, all I can say to you with utmost sincerity is I either need you to call it a night or I need 5 minutes.
Team, what do we want to do?
Call it a night. I mean, I'm not certified for the next couple applications, so I'm out.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, well
I just
then,
got out of the hospital and I'm tired.
So is
Can I
counsel
bring the
for
other attorneys in?
Ecosystems and Wadsworth here?
Yes, hold on. Mr. Dorado, you are certified for ecosystems.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Salvatore Alfieri. We're on for ecosystems.
Okay, Sal, are you able to go in another 2 weeks?
We can do more. I can do March 3rd. And I know my client's very anxious to get this finished, so we'd love to have that night.
Okay.
And you
Is
have
that
another application on for submission waivers that night.
That's correct.
Okay. So Mr. Chair, can I make the announcement?
Yes, please.
Okay, the application of Ecosystems LLC, case number SP 1093, be carried to the board's March 3rd, 2022 meeting. Will be a remote meeting beginning at 7 o'clock. All documents are on file and available for inspection with at the Township Planning Department and on the Township's website. All instructions on how to access the meeting will be on the Township's website at least 10 days prior. There'll be no further notice to property owners.
Mr. Alfieri, I also need an extension of time on that one.
Fine, we'll grant the extension through March 31st in case something happens on the 3rd.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, is Mr. Herbert here?
Yes, he
Seventh,
is.
7th, not the 3rd, the 7th.
It's the 7th?
I am here.
March 3rd is the planning board meeting.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking at the zoning board. I'm sorry. Sorry, Eileen.
Thank
You
you.
just threw my schedule off there, Jim. Okay, so, Mr. Herbert, can we try and get you on the 3rd too?
Mr. Kuchera, if we could have the 17th, my engineer is not available on the 3rd.
Okay. All right.
And I
so
figure as an Irishman on St. Patty's Day, maybe the board would look at me with a little bit more favor. What do you think?
I don't think so, because we look upon you with the utmost favor every time you appear.
Oh, you're terrific. Thank you.
All right, so the application of Wadworth Development LLC, case number SD-2998 will be carried to the board's March 17th, 2022 meeting, be a virtual meeting beginning at 7 o'clock. All instructions on how to access the meeting will be available on the township's website. All documents, plans, and any other materials associated with the application will be available on the township's website for inspection. There will be no further notice to property owners.
Green beer for everyone.
Mr. Herbert, that's due to expire that night. Would you like to grant the board an extension of time?
I would be glad to.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it for things we have to carry, right, Aileen?
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Have a good
That
night, everyone.
motion.
Be careful out there.
Oh,
Motion to adjourn, Brian.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
have a good night. Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Thank you.